Good day and welcome to today's Association for Learning Environments webinar, Finding the Link Between Innovative Schools and Student Engagement. Our speakers today are Diego Barrera and Dr. Zumei Zhu. Diego is an architect with more than 10 years of experience in education design. He creates innovative solutions for a broad range of education projects specializing in planning, visioning, and design. As leader of Stantec's Innovative Learning Environments Research and Benchmarking Group, he explores approaches to creating forward-thinking educational design. He delivers progressive designs that are suitable to client needs by implementing a comprehensive design process developed through a solid understanding of the client's vision. Dr. Zhu is an associate professor in the Department of Agriculture at Texas A&M University. She is interested in environment behavior research and its design application, with a special focus on healthy and walkable communities, healthcare facilities, and learning environments. Her research is supported by agencies such as the National Institutes of Health, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the American Institute of Architects, and has been widely published and presented. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar, and I'm now going to turn the call over to our speakers.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody, for joining. It's great to be sharing this research with you guys and have the opportunity to get your questions and have a conversation about what we're going to share. This is the first presentation in a series that Stantec is partnering with A4Lee to provide this educational series. And upcoming in our series is these two presentations, Creating Safer and Resilient Schools and Occupancy Evaluations, Key to Health and Building Success. So I would invite you to join those. But I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll ask Dr. Zhu to introduce herself. I'm Diego Barrera, and as Matt said, I'm a senior designer with Stantec. And we're very happy to be sharing this with you, but just, Dr. Zhu and myself, we're part of the Innovative Learning Environments Research and Benchmarking Group at Stantec, but although you only hear from the two of us today, there's a bunch of folks that have worked really hard in creating the research and the results you're going to see today. So I wanted to kind of thank all those folks that have been part of this research as we move forward. But Dr. Zhu is going to talk a little bit about her background. One clarification, she's not part of the College of Agriculture. You might have guessed it is the College of Architecture, but Dr. Zhu, take us off.
Thank you, Diego, and thanks, Matt. So my name is Zumei Zhu in Department of Architecture at Texas A&M University. So it's really a pleasure to be here. I know it's an unusual time, so I'm hoping everyone and your family is staying safe and healthy, and hopefully our webinar will make the day a bit more interesting and productive for you. Okay. So the quick overview of today's agenda, we will start from a quick introduction of the background and then move into an elementary study that was done between 2015 and 2016. And then the last section will be an ongoing study that was started in 2017 with a focus on several middle and high school studies and with more research activities coming up after this. So with that, I will give you a kind of introduction about the rationale for our kind of research and practice collaboration. And to explain that, I want to draw a comparison between what we do in the field of architecture and medical research and practice. So on the left side, you see the pyramid that kind of illustrates how medical professionals are really kind of working together to build a knowledge base to inform their best practice. So you see layers of different levels of studies and knowledge that they are gathering, from individual case study to case control study where they would be comparing, for example, two groups getting different types of treatment, to cohort study where they follow patients as they get treated over time to see how that treatment or medication is working, or the gold standard randomized controlled trial where they randomly assign participants to either the case condition or the control condition to be able to get more rigorous results about the impact, the effect of the potential treatment that is being studied. And if you keep moving up, you can see how they add these different studies together to develop their practice guideline, and they also refer to systematic review of the literature and even meta-analysis to be able to get really rigorous findings about, for example, the impact of a particular treatment for a particular population, etc. So it's a very rigorous process. And when we look on the right side, looking at and think about all those exciting projects we do in our practice, each of them, I would say and argue, is really a wonderful research opportunity because each of them is wonderful case study, and sometimes we get to do case control comparison by comparing design projects using different approaches for the similar functions, similar design goals, or sometimes we get to do pre-post comparison. When a building is renovated, new school is built, we get to assess the impact of a new project. And sometimes we even get the opportunity to develop randomized controlled trials. So I really want to draw this comparison and kind of advocate and the potential impact of research. And that is also why and how we started our work in a way. So back in 2015, when I started working with Diego and his team, we had this interesting project from Lee Elementary in the Capel School District. Very exciting design ideas, a lot of new design strategies trying to improve student engagement and learning. So we are really interested in developing a post-occupancy evaluation for this brand new school. At the same time, there are several other schools that use more traditional school design and furniture design in the school, same school district with very similar curriculum. So we are also interested in comparing those two schools. And what made it more interesting is the traditional schools were at that time receiving new furniture. And we were also able to follow up to assess the impact of furniture replacement while the school buildings remain the same. So that is the first study. And moving into 2017, we had a few other projects, middle school and high school. And the left is the Shadow Creek brand new school. We also have two other middle schools that is either being renovated or completely rebuilt. So again, we want to utilize that opportunity for either post-occupancy evaluation or pre-post comparison. So for the two old schools, now we have the baseline data collected. As we move forward, we also will be collecting post-intervention results. So with that, I will turn back to Diego to give everyone a quick introduction about the background of this research effort.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to do before we dig into both of those studies is just give you a little bit of background of why we're doing this. As I mentioned, I'm a senior designer at Stantec, and at Stantec we've been doing educational design for the last, since the 50s. And in Texas, we've been, our practice is mostly focused on that aspect. And so as leaders in the educational design, it was important for us, and it continues to be important to us, to engage in research to understand what's changing in education and how new educational facilities need to respond to that. So Stantec, we spend about $1 million a year in research grants, not all for educational design, but for our design research overall. And we have 8 active groups in the Research and Benchmark Team program. One of them is the one that I have the privilege of leading, which is the Innovative Learning Environments group, which is where the project that you're going to see today came from. But the idea with that research is that we wanted to understand and really try to test out sort of some of the ideas that we've been implementing over the years. In fact, we started over 10 years ago. And when this R&B group started, the goal was to create better planning tools to have to help our clients and ourselves really have a clear communication and create spaces that really had an impact on learners. So the idea was the big idea that we started with was that learning environments are really influenced by three things: the what, the how, and specific actions. The what being, what is the program that's being taught in that space, right? It's an elementary school, it's in a high school, it's in an academy, it's a technical program. The how is education being delivered? Is it a project-based learning school? Is it a more traditional? How is that program being delivered? And then the specific actions. And to aid that conversation in planning, we created this list of 10 learning activities, right? There's nothing magical about this list, and it's 10 because 11 was too many and 9 was too few. But really the idea was that with these 10, what we were trying to do was capture, hopefully, about all of the learning activities that happen in a typical school day or in a typical school setting for our students. And the reason that we wanted to use these is because they allowed us to have a common language with both from the architecture side of, as educational facility experts with actual education experts, so that we could really have a common language and understand what the goals are. So that's why we created further definitions for them by having specific actions that really define what we were trying to say and to create. And so these activities helped us create this planning activity that we call the learning activity mapping. And how this activity takes place is that you have these cards, and as you can see, these cards have mostly white space, and that's by design because we understand that they're incomplete and that there's more to this story than using these 10 words. So the idea in this activity is that we want to create a story about the typical day or perhaps typical week or month in a student's life, and through that story try to really capture what that learning activity, how students are spending time, so that then we can start translating that into a space that really supports that. But this idea of time was important because we know that what happens in a school in the morning is not the same thing that happens in an afternoon, and what happens at the beginning of the school year is not the same as what happens at the end of the school year. So the idea was to represent time by the quantity of cards. So if you look at the screen now, you see 2 purple cards that say lecturing and 3 that say studying next to it. Well, the comparison there is that each one of these cards is about 5% of the student's time. There should be 20 on the screen. And so not only are we telling a story of what a student is doing, but we're also telling a story of how much, so that we know what flexibility we can have when we're doing planning and programming to create spaces that really aid this, these learning activities specifically. And then from there, we move on in that planning process to understanding what types of spaces are going to support those specific learning activities. And we have conversations around space types that we've developed to really try to understand and have real life examples of spaces that could do that. So we've been using these planning tools for a while now, and we had the opportunity to sort of test them in this study in Capel ISD when we designed Lee Elementary. Lee Elementary is a very unique school for many reasons, but one of the things that we did here is that we used all of our tools. We used all of our planning tools, and so afterwards we had the opportunity to see if those were actually if what we had planned was actually taking place. But I'll walk you a little bit through what this project is and how it turned out. Capel was a really good district for us to test our assumptions, because what it allowed us to do is that it provided us with an opportunity to compare schools in a district where the demographics are very similar. Capel ISD is not a huge district, and demographically is very similar throughout. So we can compare 2 schools and not necessarily control for the differences of the students, but at least understand that the differences weren't very drastic. And it was also interesting because this was going to be the first elementary school building in Capel in about 30 plus years, right? Stantec did the original elementaries back in the 80s, and while they were great buildings back then, they really don't reflect how they're delivering education. In fact, this new school wasn't really changing the way they deliver education. It was really just reflecting the way that they're delivering education now. So that comparison was even stronger, right? Because we know all of the elementaries were delivering education in this way, which was a project-based learning, student-centered kind of curriculum, but they didn't have a campus that represented that. So in this campus, as you can see, it's based around the space that has a number 6, which is sort of their open collaboration learning, the most similar thing to a library that you'll find here, but it's completely open. And around it, you have learning houses, 2 on the first floor, and then 3 more on the second floor. And all of those learning houses, although you see each one of those learning houses and you see 4 what look like traditional classrooms, those number 1s, there's always in that learning house from 6 to 8 classes taking place, but they're taking place throughout all of these spaces. Students are coming out to the wet and dry labs that are outside of the classrooms. They're going into the pull-out spaces and the small collaboration rooms, but it is this moving around these spaces that makes this plan very efficient, but also a plan that really allows for the right space for the right activity. And you can see that as it was organized, it allowed not just different types of groups to gather, but also different types of settings for different types of activities. So again, as we looked at this building, it looks like a different elementary. It acts like a different elementary. This is the closest to a typical classroom. It's also, the first net zero school in the state of Texas. But what we wanted to understand is what impact does this school that's really designed around the curriculum, it's really designed around how education is being delivered, what impact does it have on the students? Does it have an impact on student engagement? So we wanted to run that comparison. We understood that the traditional schools were already delivering school in this manner. You can see that little plan under the green bar over there. But we also understood that we had another comparison that we could do. As Dr. Su mentioned earlier on, there was all of the elementary schools were getting new furniture. And let me pause here and say that it wasn't just a furniture package for everybody and everybody's getting what we ordered. We planned the furniture package with each campus and with each grade level. So each grade level of each campus had complete decision-making power into what furniture they get and what furniture they got. And so that was really to allow those classrooms and those grade levels to have the appropriate furniture to support their educational delivery. So that was another scenario within those schools. And lastly, we have Lee Elementary. The comparison was, how does the traditional Lakeside school with traditional furniture compare to Lee? What is the improvement between Lakeside as a traditional school with old furniture and new furniture? And then how close can we close the gap when we compare Lakeside with traditional furniture, traditional design but new furniture, to Lee Elementary? So those were the results that we were going to show you. So along with having what is a traditional, sorry, I'm skipping slides here, but a traditional post-occupancy evaluation that really measures just user satisfaction from acoustics, lighting, thermal comfort views, building, and furniture. We wanted to add another part to that assessment and really measure student engagement. And that's where we came to find a research tool that would let us measure not just engagement, but dissatisfaction as well, because we knew dissatisfaction was an important part of that research. And it was a bit of a challenge to have that tool, because as you know, the survey tool was asking students to gauge their satisfaction with the building and also trying to understand their engagement. But it was surveys directly at students, right? So part of the challenge was creating a survey that 6 to 12-year-old could do, and they would complete, right? Because nobody likes doing surveys, and kids are no different. And so that was a little bit of the challenge with the tool. But this was the result comparing the old school with old furniture to Lee. You can see the orange line is Lee Elementary, the brand new school, and the blue is Lakeside. And you can see in every category, Lee performs better. As expected, acoustics, lighting, views, and all of the building satisfaction was much higher. It is a brand new school, the other schools from the 80s, so that was expected. But what we wanted to test and what we were glad to see was the student engagement was higher as well. So you can see on this areas where we're seeing student engagement and dissatisfaction. So not only were students more emotionally and behaviorally engaged, but they were less dissatisfied both emotionally and behaviorally. And in fact, the growth there was much bigger than on the engagement side. So we didn't want to do this just one time, right? And so we went back and we measured Lee again, and we measured Lakeside with the new furniture. And one of the things that we noticed and that you'll see is that once Lakeside gets new furniture, as expected, the gap in furniture satisfaction pretty much disappears. And interestingly, the behavioral dissatisfaction and emotional dissatisfaction, but specifically behavioral dissatisfaction, you start seeing that gap begin to close. So that was one of the things that we wanted to test, and moving forward, the idea of using these tools is that we wanted to see if we could apply these in the middle school and high school setting, because that was going to let us have a little bit more of a complex survey tool, having an older population. And Dr. Su is going to tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, thanks, Diego. So when we wrapped up the elementary school study in late 2016, we got really encouraged by the findings from the school, from both the elementary, the brand new school, and also Lakeside, where only furniture is replaced. So we decided to carry on and also had a few other projects that become possible, offers opportunity for more research. So a few key questions that we want to address in this middle school and high school study, also because students are more mature, relatively more capable to answer a bit more complex questions. So we want to understand how students are using school spaces by location and also in terms of time distribution for different learning activity. We want to see how these spaces are actually meeting their needs for different learning activity again, and also in this process, what role, what impact does the school environment play? So to accomplish that, we developed a conceptual framework with the key focus being the impact of built environment on student engagement and academic performance, and referring to the social ecological theory, knowing the personal factors of the student and also social influence from teacher, from curriculum are also very important. We are also including those as confounding factors in our whole study to make sure we are getting really rigorous results from the effort. So this table shows the main domains of variable we are capturing if you refer to the first column on left. And second column explains the constructs within each domain. And the last column is some sample items, mostly from survey, a few from other data sources. So the top row, academic performance, and the bottom row, students' individual information, socio-demographic characteristics, were collected from the school district in a way that is de-identified. By de-identify, we mean we collected students' ID in the online survey we gave out to students, and we forward those ID to the school district so that they can share information about their social demographic characteristics and academic performance without revealing the individual student identity. Because what they gave us is only the student ID and the corresponding characteristic for that student. So in the survey that was distributed to students using an online platform called Portraits, we are capturing information about student engagement. which has 4 subdomains based on the previously validated survey instrument. And we also have developed our own questions for space and time use for specific type of learning activity. And we also ask for collect information about student perception of environment and how their teachers are having influence on their learning, because we know that's very important as well. And as a sample for time use, we are asking students to report roughly the percentage of time they use for specific activity. For location, using the online tool, we are asking them to, so we are showing a floor plan in online survey and asking students to point to the location that they used most often for each specific type of activity, as you see on the list on left. And we also, so the image here is a sample of heat map that we can generate from the survey results that really visualizes what is the most often frequently used space for a particular type of activity. And we also have questions asking students about how well those school spaces actually meet their needs for particular learning activity, whether it's individual work, collaboration, or socializing, etc. And meanwhile, behind the scene, this is what not shown to students. This is a sample from another school. We have pre-coded school spaces by the design intention. So just like Diego explained earlier, we have different space typology. We have envisioned particular type of space being used, for example, simulation lab being used for simulation activity, etc. So when we get student responses back, which is like kind of visualized on the floor plan, we can overlay that activity map with what we have as design intention to see whether students are actually using those spaces as we design, or sometimes maybe not. So that's kind of interesting comparison too. And for assessment of teacher influences, we also look for the validated survey instruments because we know they have been well studied. There are good survey samples instruments out there. So the one we adopted has 3 subdomains that they are capturing by multiple questions. One domain is about how involved the teacher is in student learning activity. Second, whether the teacher provides a good structure for learning. And the third, whether the teacher really supports the autonomy of learning by enabling students to be more independent. And those are all validated with good reliability and validity. So now Diego will share a bit more information about each specific school we are studying. Yeah.
Yeah, like Dr. Su mentioned, there's 3 schools in this phase of the study. 1 high school and 2 middle schools, and the high school is Shadow Creek High School, and this high school is similar to Lee in that it's it tries to create different variety of spaces for different types of learners and different types of learning activities. And added to that is the challenge that it's a rather big school, 2,400 students. And so to break down that scale, it's arranged in 5 learning houses, and each one of those learning houses is really divided in 2 to provide students with a little bit of a scale that allows them to really belong to those spaces. So you start seeing that the public spaces are of a pretty large scale. The idea here was that it has that collegiate feel, and there's a lot of transparency so that as activity takes place, students can really connect and really see what's happening. So even spaces that would typically be closed off have a little bit more visibility into them. But those learning houses are set up, the school is three floors, but they're set up in such a way that there's different types of spaces and for different activities. So there's direct instruction, which would be the closest thing to a traditional classroom, but there's also a lot of collaborative space, and what would be something similar to a conference room that students can check out for student work, right? You can see an example of that there. And then a lot of spaces for informal breakout spaces around, as well as and this core it would be the create spaces, which are labs and maker spaces and the such. But so this is one learning house of about 480, but really down the middle is split into each one of those academies, so students really have a sense of belonging, and this is sort of their home in this campus. The two middle school projects are both the Burleson ISD. One is Hughes Middle School, and the other one is Kerr. Hughes is a school that's original from the 70s, and the idea was to renovate it to really bring it up to what the school or how the district is delivering education today. So minor updates in the exterior, but really the interior was the idea of opening up this space, making the library, instead of a space that's behind doors in the corner, making it really the heart of the building, and taking that old floor plan that was really a lot of inbound classrooms. A lot of that can't be solved, but very disconnected circulation in the building, and bringing that library, as I mentioned, that's that yellow box, bring it up to the center of the building and create some collaboration and flexible space for each one of those learning houses for each one of the grade levels. So the idea is that going from what is a pretty closed off and traditional school to something that's a little bit more open. And in Kerr Middle School, the existing building here was deemed as it would be too expensive to keep it, so it was a completely new building for the school that's also been around since the 60s. But the strategy was the same: create spaces for collaboration, create a heart of the building with that library. You've seen renderings of the new school, but you can see that library that would be in this picture sort of towards the back, if you will, combined with the dining and the stage, it really becomes a very flexible space that can take on different activities and can really facilitate a lot of different functions. This is the old plan, and as you can see, it was several buildings that are disconnected, and so it was easier to create a brand new building with where that goal of very open collaborative space could be achieved, and also create those learning houses, one on the first floor, two on the second floor, that have along the edges a lot of collaboration space, as well as sort of an open space for both students and teacher planning. And the idea was that this school kind of created or designed around this idea of different levels of collaboration would really allow students to change the way that they really approach their projects, because it is a project-based delivery, but as you saw on the old campuses, there really weren't spaces for students to gather and learn informally. Some pictures from the before and sort of pictures of what we have of what's being designed now. So
okay. Yeah. So now we will move into the results. We are really lucky in a way. We got great support from all the three schools, and they actually asked students invited them to respond to the online survey during class time. So that's a huge boost to our response rate. As you can see, we got a range of response rate from 51% in Shadow Creek High School to all the way up to 80% from Hughes Middle School. So that's really kind of unusually high compared to what we typically get in our other studies. And I will be walking through some of the descriptive information about the results quickly by using Hughes Middle School as an example. So for example, we want to know and understand how students are using their time during the school day. So the chart on the right shows a distribution based on student responses. Again, it's a high response rate, and we can see about 11.9% spent in simulating things, 12% for creating things, and about 26% for individual work, and about 14% for collaborative work, etc. And it's also interesting, two middle schools have rather similar time use pattern. And when we compare that with Shadow Creek High School, overall it's also close and similar, except for Shadow Creek High School, so it's different grade level. They spend relatively less time on individual work, and their percentage is 21.8% versus about 26% in Hughes Middle School and 28% in Kerr Middle School. So that's interesting to see. And we also want to find out where students engage in different activities, and we have a list of 6. So students were shown a floor plan like this, and they were asked in the online survey to identify 3 top locations that they use the most often for each learning activities. So this allows us to understand the spatial distribution of learning, and we also have questions about how well does your school environment meet your needs for either collaboration, individual activity, etc. It's a 5-point scale. If they chose extreme answers, like either extremely well or not well at all, we have follow-up open-ended questions asking them, kind of probing for more detailed information about why they feel that way. And we also have a group of questions asking about how satisfied they are with different aspects of the school environment.
Dr. May I interrupt at this point?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in because I think I didn't make this point. So the results that you're going to see right now for Hughes and Kerr are for the original building. So this study for Kerr and Hughes is a pre-post. So the studies are of the old facilities because we just completed the new ones, and the goal was to do the surveys at the end of the school year. But the students won't be in the school, so we'll probably do them next year. But I just wanted to make sure that we mention that because as you look at the floor plans, you'll look at the old ones, and that's the why. It's because we did it before we demoed demolition or before we moved to the new campus.
Yeah. Thanks, Diego, for clarification. Okay. So what I will be showing is a few sample responses for different learning activity. So this slide is for activity of simulating. So on right is a heat map based on students' individual responses, and the heat hotspots are those that are most frequently used for simulation. You can see bands, theater, practice gym, library, etc., and cafeteria. And on the left is the 5-point scale I mentioned and distribution of responses for each category. And you can see the distribution and overall how well the school space is performing. And if they answered extremely well, for example, we have a follow-up open-ended question probing for more details about why. So these are just some examples, like it helps students focus more, it feels safe, we have a lot of space that facilitates simulation, and also if students said, oh, it's not well at all, and we are seeing responses about space limitation, it takes a lot of setting up and work, etc. We don't have the supplies, money, and the time. So it's kind of really informative in a way. And the second is about creating things. So on right, again, you see the heat map. On the left is the distribution of the responses. And some specific open-ended answers for why they feel it's extremely well because of the availability of spaces, availability of materials, bigger classroom made it easier to do things, and also bigger open spaces that are really helpful. While they talk about limit, interestingly, some students feel that limitation in terms of the availability of spaces could be different type of creating things, different type of specific activity. And this is for individual work. And looking at the heat map, you can see library is definitely the top destination for individual work. And you can also see from the left the distribution of the responses. So overall, students responded quite positively for this item. And their specific answer explain more about the size of the classroom is good. Not having too many distractions is always helpful. Library is also helpful, and the acoustic environment as well. So again, we are getting more in-depth information about why. This is about socializing. And I will go over a bit more quickly about the specifics. They like the cafeteria, being able to sit wherever they want, allow them the flexibility to socialize, and having open spaces to gather around is really helpful. And now we are moving into the comparison of 3 schools. So Diego just clarified the data set we have right now is for Shadow Creek High School, which is a brand new facility, and also 2 old middle school, Hughes and Kerr. So the comparison you're looking at here is students' average satisfaction with different aspects of school environment. So what I want to highlight here is Shadow Creek is definitely outperforming significantly in terms of the student perception of views in the school, their perception about furniture, about school spaces, and the school building. So we are encouraged for sure, because it's brand new design, more design strategies catering to today's learning style. And this slide shows a more detailed breakdown of student satisfaction with views, because these are the original questions that were asked. So in Shadow Creek, students are more satisfied overall about being able to look outside, see other spaces from where they were sitting in the classroom, and they like what they can see from either the classroom or to the outside. So because the Shadow Creek does have a lot more transparency in the design. And this slide shows satisfaction with different spaces in school. So students in Shadow Creek High School did give significantly higher rating to common spaces and classroom spaces, as well as gymnasium. There are not too big difference for cafeteria and the library. And this slide shows satisfaction with furniture. So on the bottom, you'll see the individual item, the question that will be asked. And students were all asked to rate these on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So for Shadow Creek High School, in this case, each single item is rated much higher. And you can also see, interestingly, Hugh and Kerr Middle School, the old building, they are quite similar in terms of their student rating. So example could be the chairs are really comfortable sitting. It's easy to arrange the furniture for different activities. It functions well with technology, etc. So this is encouraging for us, for the designers, of course. And now we'll move into the main focus analysis targeting in response to our research question. So we are interested in how design affects student engagement. To address that, we run a regression model that predicts student engagement individually for each school using 3 domains of variable. The green domain is personal factors with some examples listed there. The blue one is the teacher influence, and the orange one is environmental factors. So this is conceptualizing how we are analyzing the data from the survey. And this slide shows the detailed information. Again, they are color-coded by domain. So the light green is student socio-demographic characteristic. The light blue is teacher influence. The kind of like orange color is the perception with school environment. So on right, you see 3 columns. Those both fonts that are highlighted in either green or red or the significant variable. Green is positive, meaning they promote, encourage engagement. Red meaning they are negative, they actually decrease engagement. So if we take Hughes Middle School, for example, and also keep in mind the engagement is measured on a 5-point scale ranging from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest level of engagement. So for Hughes Middle School, the block of student socio-demographic characteristics didn't have any significant variable that predict engagement. And interestingly, second block, for teacher influences, the teacher involvement in student learning and teachers' provision of structure for learning are both significant. And the way to interpret this number, the 0.219, for example, for teacher involvement is that's also captured on the 5-point scale with 1 unit increase in teacher involvement, with other factors holding constant. the engagement of the student will increase by 0.219 on a 5-point scale. So that's rather significant. It kind of shows the level of magnitude of the impact. And if you move to the third block, satisfaction with school physical environment, the variable satisfaction with overall school design is significant. And with 1 unit increase in their satisfaction, students' engagement level will increase by 0.11 on a 5-point scale. So again, that's rather significant and kind of encouraging for us as designers. And the second column, similarly, how to interpret that. So for here, we do see 2 personal variables, gender. Males are more likely to have lower engagement level, boys, and also grade level. As you go higher in grade level, your engagement level tend to go down a little bit. And for the second block, teacher influence, here we see teacher involvement and the teacher provision of autonomy support are positive. And when we move into the environmental variable, we see lighting condition is a positive predictor. Again, you can interpret it by 1 unit increase in the satisfaction with lighting. That engagement in this case increased by 0.075. And also interestingly, for view, we break them down to different sub-variables because they are capturing different aspects of view. So the visual openness is actually negative, likely because of the distraction. We don't know 100% sure, but it could be one potential reason. But their visual preference, they like what they see, is a positive predictor. And also their satisfaction with furniture and the satisfaction with the overall school design are really significant. So if we move into Shadow Creek High School, the last column, because they were more sensitive about collecting information about the teacher, so we were not able to include questions about teacher in their survey. But for socio-demographic features, none of them is significant. And for satisfaction with school physical environment, we see significant impact of acoustics, furniture, and school design. So overall, if you compare 3 models across 3 schools, what's really encouraging and consistent is the bottom row, the impact of school design. In each school, the more satisfied students are with school design, the more engaged they are in learning. So this is really promising and encouraging for us. So we also want to predict student academic performance. So in this model, we included 4 domains: personal factors, teacher influence, built environment, and their own engagement level. And similar color-coded different domains of variables, and 3 columns on the right showed the results from 3 different schools. So one difference I want to highlight is for Hughes and Kerr Middle School, the academic performance data we got is their math scores and their reading score. So we use average of that. But for Shadow Creek, the academic indicator we got is GPA. So the range of the value is quite different. So I will probably take Hughes Middle School as one example and work down through the column here. So for personal factors, grade level is positive, likely because at different grade level, their actual range of test scores are different. And it's important to note, as we would expect, free or reduced price lunch is a negative predictor. So in this case, it means if all other variables were held constant, if the student is eligible for free or reduced price lunch, meaning from a low-income family, the average score of math or reading will be lower by 39 points. So it's really significant impact, as you see here. And the blue block, the teacher influence did not show significant impact here. And when you move to school physical environmental variable, the visual openness shows up again. It's interesting. It's a negative factor. So like we were talking about earlier, and this is in the, again, older school facility. So maybe some of the visual distraction is having a role in terms of student academic performance. And if we move into engagement, behavioral dissatisfaction is negative. So that's about, like, it includes multiple questions, like I do different things, I think about other things while I was in classroom, etc. And so I will probably not repeat everything for Kerr Middle School, but if we look at Shadow Creek, for example, we see within personal factors, their gender, like being a male, a boy is a negative predictor. And again, remind the value range is very different here because for Shadow Creek High School, the outcome is GPA, so it's a much smaller range. And the free or reduced price lunch are being Hispanic students are negative predictor. And if we move into physical environment, good lighting condition and visual preference of views actually predicts better academic performance, while thermal discomfort is a negative predictor. And if we move into engagement, the behavioral disaffection is again a negative predictor. So it's kind of like, again, showing the results of what environmental factor may play a role. And we do plan to do some more complex analysis because we know there are some interactive relationship between school environment and engagement. So we will run more complex model that will be able to better explain and understand this interactive relationship. So with that, we are really excited about what we saw so far. And as Diego has mentioned, we plan to do a follow-up assessment of Hughes and Kerr Middle School when they have their new facility in place. And we're really kind of excited to see what will turn out in terms of pre-post comparison. And that's really it for us. We are also hoping to do more comprehensive systematic study by further developing our survey instrument, use it as a consistent tool to build more knowledge base for future practice. Hopefully the tool set could also be better validated in future for wider use. And we are also working together on publications and external grants, and hopefully the new knowledge we generate from this project could really be beneficial and informative for the whole field of educational design. And that's it, and we are open for questions.
I think as we have questions pop in, and I know Matt is going to help us facilitate those, I did want to share a little bit that one of the value propositions here for our clients, because it is, it is a true partnership where these school districts are partnering with us, sharing some of the information, and we're working on this together. One of the things that we get out of the surveys, of the information that's valuable, is that by understanding how their students use space, we can make minor adjustments, whether it be in furniture or whether it be in scheduling or in other things, to the campus as it exists, so that it functions better for students, and obviously creates a lot of knowledge for us for a future facility as that district moves forward. But that was one of the things that we thought was important, is that when we presented this data, wasn't just something that is very useful for us and generates a lot of knowledge, but also has some practical results for our clients.
Okay, so we are going to open up the floor for questions from the audience. If you've got any questions for our speakers, go ahead and type those into the Q&A pod, and we'll address those here in our final moments today. There was a question that had come in during the presentation asking if there were any numbers that could be shared that compare the GSF per student for the total area of the innovative versus traditional school.
We don't. Great. It's a great question. As far as gross square footage per students compared to kind of the area dedicated to innovative space, we don't have that. We do have a separate study that we would be glad to share at a different point, where that is our focus, kind of going back 10, I think we're going back 15 years and looking at our high schools and comparing gross square footage and comparing sort of amenities and how that's changed over the years. But in this particular study, we don't have that.
All right. There's a question in here asking, are the survey research tools for this study validated statistically for reliability and validity? Can you describe the process?
Okay, I guess I will take that question, Matt. So we have different sections in our survey. Some of them, as explained earlier, like I'm referring to a slide we actually included here. I'm not sure if everyone sees that. So for student engagement assessment, we are relying on previously validated instruments. So this slide, if you see engagement versus dissatisfaction with learning, actually explain the conceptual kind of domains for engagement assessment. And also on right, you see Dr. Skinner, her team have this instrument developed and also tested for both reliability and validity. So that is validated like in multiple studies and used very widely in education research. And similarly for student in teacher influence, that's also relying on validated instruments from previous research. And we probably have a slide that briefly mentioned it there. I couldn't find it right away, but that is validated. For the question about satisfaction with like acoustics, lighting condition, etc., we refer to a valid survey instrument from UC Berkeley. From their Center for the Built Environment, they have the occupant indoor environmental quality survey for school. But so that itself is validated. We did make some minor revision to make it easier to read to young students. So the revision itself hasn't been completely tested. So as I referred to at the end of the presentation, for a few new questions that we developed or customized or adopted, etc., we do hope to find some opportunity to do tests for validity and reliability as well. So some of them are not yet.
Okay. Our next question references a specific slide, and I know they're not numbered on screen, so I'm not sure if we can reference this exact one. But Paul was saying slide 83 seems to show a negative correlation with visual openness and academic performance. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. We were thinking about the same thing, and Diego and I actually talked about this. We also feel we need to look more into the data. We also feel the need to look into the context for this particular school. So here's Middle School, and Diego, feel free to chime in. You know more about the school itself. It's an old school that doesn't really have much openness, honestly, in terms of visual openness. But it could be, my guess, it could be some particular area that does have it, limited area that may also have some distractions, etc. But yeah, so that's something we did notice up front, and they stand out, and we hope to do a bit more like analysis, in-depth analysis, and also a bit more like site visit, etc., to better understand how or why it is an active factor that stands out. Yeah. So it's not a perfect answer, but yeah.
Yeah, I think as Dr. Su mentioned, the short answer is we don't know for sure. I think that as we've had conversations, and as I've had conversations with the principal, sometimes the visual openness, one of the hunches that we have is that the visual openness is connected in that old campus to classrooms just being completely open. And so there is a noise issue that is connected to that, and since our survey doesn't really address the noise issue, it might be captured there. But that is where one of the things that we want to do moving forward is, just as we did in the questions regarding specific satisfaction with specific spaces for specific activities, where we ask if you rate very highly or very poorly to tell us a little bit more, a question that where you can write out why. We want to get to that point in these as well, so that where some of these outliers we can address them that way. Since I see it right here, I'm going to jump into the next question, which is how this research is funded. So in one of our opening slides, I was mentioning that Stantec has a grant of $1 million every year to fund research throughout the company, and so it's funded internally, and so it is a competitive grant, and so internally we have to submit for these grants, and the R&B program, the Research and Benchmarking group that I lead, which is the Innovative Learning Environments, we have been lucky to get funding for this for the last 10 years really, and we continue to seek that funding. And as Dr. Su mentioned in her closing slide, we're also trying to find other sources so that we can scale this up and create a bigger knowledge base that we can then share out with our clients and with our peers.
Okay. The next question that's come in from Julia asks if you look at specific requirements for each curriculum course.
We don't go, I think, to that level of specificity, no. I think we look at the delivery, the type of educational delivery. So we try to understand using the planning tools that we mentioned earlier, what is the type of education that's happening in that space, but a much broader scale. We don't look at the syllabus of every course, for example, but we do understand if it's a school that has a specialty, right? So if it's an academy that perhaps has a CTE program or something in the trades, we try to assess for that and cover that in both the planning and the research. But to the level of specific courses, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, so Diego, just to add to that, we do have plans for like more in-depth focus group with teachers and administrators. That could be one angle we could add in terms of like some courses may have specific requirements. So yeah, it's a great point to take on for our next step.
Okay, the next question is asking if the survey was multiple choice or did it include essay or drawing style responses for other modes of communication?
Okay, so I will probably take on that question. So I briefly mentioned, probably not as clear as it could be, a lot of the survey questions, since we have this slide with different variables here, most of the survey questions were captured using a 5-point Likert scale. So we have a statement I focused on like lecture when I'm in classroom, etc. And the student will ask about how much they agree with the statement, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree 1 to 5. So that's the most typical type of question format. For a few that will be different is like when we mentioned a little bit, when we ask students how well the school environment is meeting their needs for particular learning activity, that goes from a 5-point scale, goes from extremely well to not well at all. So when they chose those two extreme answers, either extremely well or not well at all, the online survey has that skip logic, so they will come up with, it will pop another question up. If you chose extremely well, can you explain why? Then that's open-ended. Students can put in specific comments there. We actually see some really interesting comments. So it depends, but overall, knowing the student's cognitive ability, we didn't ask really complex questions. For the mapping, the location question, we showed them the floor plan, and the online survey allowed them point to the location and click to show this is one of their most frequently used location for a particular type of activity. So those are the major 3 types of question formats. Yeah.
Okay, our next question asks if you have looked at the school's connection to the exterior build environment.
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's one that it's more applicable, I think, to our first study. For Lee Elementary, that was a big component of the design of that school. I don't think that our survey tool, and Dr. Su, you can chime in here after, that specifically addresses kind of outdoor learning or outdoor environments, but it is definitely an aspect that we've been sort of mulling around how to add that dimension to the survey. As Dr. Su alluded to earlier, part of the complication here is that we we want to make sure that as we add more dimensions to this study, that every tool that we use is a validated tool, and so that that's been a little bit of the challenge with some of the areas that we don't cover yet. Is that we could add questions and just see what we get as far as results, but what we want to do is make sure that we're very diligent in the type of tools that we use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Diego, if I can also add to that, I think it's a great question. It reminds me kind of our earlier discussion about visual openness. It could also be about what kind of view or scenery the visual openness is opening to. So they could be like looking into a beautifully landscaped courtyard, or they could be looking into a parking lot, or they could be looking into a busy hallway with a lot of students and teachers passing by. So that may be another layer that kind of potentially could help us better understand the impact of visual openness, because we know it may not mean the same thing depending on what they are open to. Yeah.
All right. Our next question asks if there are studies that show the results vary among different demographic groups. For example, does lighting have a more significant impact on educational achievement with students in the free and reduced price meal program as compared to students who are not?
Okay, so we are getting into more complex research questions. It's a great question. I don't have a direct answer right on top of my head, but that kind of relates to, and again, I love the question, it relates to the more complex analysis I mentioned up front. So for our own study, we do hope to use a different statistical model, structure equation model, that would allow us to test the kind of interactive relationship that you're referring to. So it could be, yes, lighting have an impact on learning, but does it also that relationship, does it also get affected by student personal factors, etc.? So yes, we hope to test that. Whether there are other studies out there, I don't have something that came to my mind right away. There may be some, but if you're interested, I would love to follow up and look a bit more, dig a bit more in the literature to see whether there's some information, good studies available in response to this. Yeah.
Okay. And it looks like there's just one more question in here right now, so if you do have any final questions or comments, go ahead and get those in now before we close down. Miranda is asking if the lighting measurement means for daylighting only.
So yeah, I'm actually looking back, trying to find the information. Remember, it's a while ago here, 35.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, going from memory, since we based our questions on the survey, our building satisfaction questions on the survey that Dr. Hsu mentioned, if I recall correctly, these are specific to artificial lighting. There is the questions that we sort of pared down to a language that was appropriate for this age group were specific to artificial lighting. And I think that's a good point, right? Because I think the natural abuse covers whether there is natural abuse, but not necessarily directly address how that natural lighting takes place. But as you can see from the three questions that are listed there regarding lighting, they're fairly open. They don't really specify. So maybe the answer is not specifically.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions that have come in from our audience. Any final thoughts here before we go?
Well, I did want to add, just finally, one of the questions that when we've had the opportunity to share this research before is whether if this is specific, something that we only do on our projects or our clients, and the answer is a very definite no. We think that, we hope that if there's value in this, and that if you are in a school district or in a school system or one of our peers and would like to deploy something similar, we would love to talk to you and see how we can improve this tool and get a little bit more information so that as we as we understand a little bit more how our students use space, that we can create space that better serves them. And just finally thank everybody for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, just like Diego mentioned, I do want to invite potential collaboration if there's any interest for either kind of using a similar research tool, build up more case studies, and kind of a larger database to allow better practice in future. And also I want to kind of advertise on my own study that I'm trying to develop here also. We have a small grant that we received not long ago. We are interested in looking at public schools in Texas from major cities to look at how school design affects student physical activity at school, as well as health condition and academic performance. So if anyone in the audience either has an interesting project that may be a good candidate, please reach out to us, and we would love to look into it to see if we could have opportunity for collaboration as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's going to conclude our webinar for today. I want to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us and all of our registrants for attending today's program. Your certificate of attendance and evaluation form will be emailed out to you within 24 hours, and we ask that you take a few moments to provide us with your thoughts on today's program. You can get registered for upcoming webinars and on-demand recordings of previous programs at education.a4le.org. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.